recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever it may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you listen to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 713. My name is Eric Nelson. With me today, I have my regular co-host, Bob Plankers. Today is Wednesday, February 4th, 2025. Bob, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. Did the groundhog see its shadow the other day? I can't remember.
Yes, it did. It said another.
So is that another 6 weeks of winter?
Yes.
So, yeah, well, California could use the rain, I'm sure. But
we believe it or not, we have been getting rain. It stormed.
Oh, good.
Stormed yesterday hard. Trees were blowing down in the
that's not good.
The Broadcom parking lot. You know, like it was walking out, you're crunching over branches. We had a storm. We had a windstorm and rain, like East Coast rain. You know how California always gets this rain. I actually got wet for the first time in forever, right? Like from rain, right? I was like, I had to hold my backpack over my head. I was like, this is uncomfortable. I know how East Coast people feel now. It's raining. And it's been cold, 33 in the morning, rain. But the sun's out today, but another storm coming tomorrow. Some more storms coming next week. So Mr. Groundhog seems to be doing his thing, right? For protecting the weather.
Yeah, well, that's all right.
Yeah. On the show today, we're going to be talking to a Broadcom engineer around disaster recovery for Microsoft SQL Server workloads in VCF. Deji is with us. I'll let him talk about his last name, but before we do that, we should do a round robin. Corey Romero, I know you've been busy working on things. What have you been up to?
Yeah, just working on applications, wrapping up the last bit of deferred applications, and then after that, move on to the declines. And once we're done with that, we move into compliance. So run everyone's name information through compliance, and then we announce.
Yes.
So yeah, that's been keeping me pretty busy.
Keeping you busy. Yeah, well, compliance is the new thing now. Broadcom gets us to do that. As we talked in earlier shows, there's because we give away free things, right? You know, and we do things special for the experts. It's fun. We have to do compliance. So it's good. In the news, let's see, we got some news. Frankie Berrigan from VMware Code has been doing Tuesday morning VCP-VCF training sessions. So if you want to get your home lab set up, you got to buy Advantage for $200 a year. Then you get your $20,000 full VCF stack license if you pass the VCP-VCF exam. Frankie has done that. I'm in the middle of doing it. And so Frankie's been running code training sessions as he kicked his first one off this Tuesday. I think there were 140 some people that joined that. So good for everybody to get the message out that Frankie will be running these right up until VMUG Connect, where we'll have testing at VMUG Connect. So you can get your Advantage, sign up for VMUG Connect in April, which is the conference in St. Louis. Swing by St. Louis, especially if you're in the Midwest region, no reason not to. Fun drive down from Chicago. I've done that drive many times before. I can imagine, Bob, you've made that drive many times as well.
I have, and actually I tried flying there a couple of years ago versus driving. It's so easier to just drive, honestly. It was like 11 hours to fly through Chicago to St. Louis, and it's 5 hours to drive. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know that it was like maybe 3 or 4 hours from Chicago down, right?
Yeah, it's a decent drive. It's flat, it's largely uneventful.
Yep, large. But it's also got the way I went had some rolling hills. So it is a pretty country. There were some to Chicago there. Nice. So that's happening. Go get your tickets and join us. It's going to actually be fun. I can now announce some of the people that are there. Hawk is confirmed to be there. He's going to be doing the closing ceremony on Friday. So if you come, it's going to go Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday afternoon, we're going to kind of do like an unconference birds of a feather type sessions in the afternoon. So if you come in on Wednesday midday, you can come by, put Post-its on whiteboards and have conversations on some topics, and we'll be publishing those topics. So for Wednesday afternoon, some fun stuff. Then I think they have a welcome reception Wednesday evening, starting at 4 or 5, where kind of be a gathering, and I'm sure alcohol and goodies to nibble on. So that's Wednesday evening, and then the conference kicks off Thursday morning with a keynote. Frank Denneman's going to be talking, so we're excited about that. He's going to come. I don't know what the topic is. I think it's on the website. He's either doing AI or something else. I don't know. Private AI. I think it's private AI, but don't quote me on that. So
he's been doing a lot of that lately.
Yeah. Him and Chris Wolf. So I think it was either Chris Wolf or him. And we wanted Frank.
Yeah, it's AI then.
Yeah. I think so. And then we have Code Labs. We're going to have some Code Labs. We're going to have William Lamb. We've identified the machine we're testing right now for the $900 Nook that you can run full VCF stack on. So we're excited about that. We'll have that. We'll have some of those machines there. We might raffle off a couple of them. So your home lab running full stack VCF. I know there's going to be a 9 preview. I think they're going to do a little bit of 9 discussion. I saw that get approved this week. So now, take this all for, things are subject to change without notice. So understand that. But looks like it's going to be a great event. It is. They're targeting deeper dive community talks, community sessions. That's why we wanted Frank to do keynote, not Hawk, right? Like we want it to be a community by the community for the community. And so it should be really interesting and different than an Explorer, right? We don't want to just do another Explorer, right? We want to do kind of drill down. So that's happening. That's why we're bringing Code Labs there. We're going to do some fun Code Lab stuff. Some of the other divisions are going to be there. So some of Broadcom's other divisions, we're trying to get a chip talk, an AI chip talk would be fun. We haven't got that one confirmed yet, but we do have a couple other divisions confirmed to come and do some sessions. I think there's 4 tracks. So go to vmug.com and check out Connect. Some of the sessions and tracks are now being published, and you can see what's going to be happening. Fun 2-day event. I think if you get your Advantage, you can get it somewhere around $400, right? And then if you drive down, then you're into the hotel for a couple nights. So a relative kind of to keep that price point pretty low. So excited about that. Bob, are you going to go?
I'm thinking about it. I don't have any. I'm not speaking or anything. If you've got holes in the schedule, I'd certainly speak or something. But I've been thinking about it. I've been waiting to see how my own personal schedule shakes up. I most likely will be there because it's an easy enough drive to St. Louis. So
I think virtual speaking is going to be there. So now the pressure is going to be on. Maybe we got to go and do a podcast there as well.
That'd be cool. Yeah, we could do this there perhaps.
Yeah. So that's it for the news. I think we got vExperts wrapping up, so stay tuned for that. Excited.
I've got one thing for the news.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Broadcom, we changed our documentation. We cut over to the TechDocs site. I've been hearing from a lot of people about that. If you've got documentation links, the high-level stuff redirects. The very granular stuff doesn't redirect. Sorry about that. All of the topics are the same title, so if you know what you're looking for, you can just search for it. But the documentation, the latest change there. And a shout out to Frankie again. Frankie and your team, Eric, has done some really good work with their blog platform too. It's a lot faster. The RSS feeds are going again, that sort of thing. And so
I was going to say that we went live last night with a new SaaS blog platform, so we're no longer on our old IT that was now no longer there, right? So
once in a while you got to refresh things. And,
we
it's really
felt
nice.
like the blog platform was like we had a hand grenade and we took the pin out and we handed it around like musical chairs, going, "Here, your turn to hold it. Yeah, okay, you're doing this weekend, you hold it." And we're just hoping the blog platform, because IT, our last IT resource actually resigned over the summer, and so it was just me and Frankie, with 5 WordPress servers and DB servers, and it's been a while since, and it's running on Kubernetes, so it was running on Tanzu as a workload, which was fun to support. So now we're on a new platform, super fast RSS feeds. If you're a blogger and you haven't submitted your blog to us, you can go to blogs.vmware.com, submit your blog, and we put it in the RSS feed for you, and you will get a lot more traffic, right? And now we've got that all turned back on. So that kind of went slow for the last 6 months while we were trying to get off the server farm that was no longer supported. So yeah, good shout outs. All right, Docs. Oh, well, one last thing on Docs. I would say that when we moved the community platform, about half the redirects didn't work, and we were catching up on redirects for like 6 months. They went back and fixed a lot of them, right? Isn't like they might not ever make it go back and get some of those working, but
it's not going to be perfect. Some of it redirects, some of it doesn't,
right.
But there's thousands and thousands of pages of documentation. And so I get it,
what I'd say is the content is there. You just have to go find it in the new.
Yeah. The titles are all the same. So just search for it,
Right.
That's all I did yesterday afternoon, updating my GitHub repository for security and compliance stuff. So yeah.
All right, Deji, thanks for hanging out. And we always start with our guest. We're going to be talking, obviously, about disaster recovery for MS SQL Server workloads in VCF. But before we get into your topic, we always say welcome to the community podcast. We are a community. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How long you've worked at VMware? What's your career arc look like? Take 3 or 4 minutes and describe how you got where you are. And
Did you say 30 minutes?
No, 3 minutes.
60 minutes.
60 minutes.
Tell us your whole life story.
I think I would need that much to even.
You're in an elevator and you don't have 7,000 floors. You only have 5 floors in this elevator.
No, I don't have to do that. Anyway, thank you guys. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Corey, Bob, and Julia. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for having me. Everybody, my name is Deji Akomolafe. Everybody calls me Deji. Don't know why, but yeah. I'm the practice lead for Microsoft application on VSphere VCF platform. I've been with VMware now going on 15 years. And I've always been the Microsoft guy at VMware. I work in a team of application specialists. All we do is help customers understand what to do and what not to do when they bring their mission-critical applications onto the VMware VCF platform. We work directly.
So before you go, I remember when you started. I remember you. You had more hair back then, right? Like that was.
And my hair was a
little gray too,
Yeah, I was all.
Somebody saw my LinkedIn profile and I had put it up. I haven't updated my picture in my LinkedIn. I don't do much LinkedIn because I've worked here for 20 years. And it's from 20 years ago. I took a picture the first year I worked over in Prom with Corey and them. And people don't recognize it. Like, I was looking for your LinkedIn. I couldn't find it. And I'm like, right here. Like, that's not you. Wait, that's a kid. Anyway, thanks for being on the show and working here for 15 years. That's fantastic. So continue on. I cut you off, but I'll let you continue on here for a second.
So I've been lucky to work in a team where all we do is interface with customers. We get to see a lot of enterprises and how they try in the past and struggle with successfully virtualizing their mission critical applications from way back from when nobody wants to touch virtualization for anything they consider important applications to when virtualization became the first point of call when you need to virtualize anything. So it's been a very, very interesting trajectory. I happen to be somebody who was a skeptic in virtualization. I pushed against virtualization for so long in my previous life, and now I became the evangelist among others for Microsoft applications on vSphere. And there's a reason why the number one virtualized application on vSphere platform today is the Microsoft SQL Server. And everybody who's used it knows that if you do the right thing, if you configure your vSphere platform according to best prevailing recommendations, your application and your end user should not know that your application is virtualized. And if you don't, then things are going to go really bad. So I've been privileged to have worked with a lot of customers, seen a lot of enterprises, a lot of infrastructures. And one of the biggest pain points in the enterprise is how to secure these mission critical applications. And that's what one of the things we are doing today is making sure that we continue to provide that education. I look forward to making this session a productive session for others who are listening now, or maybe listening to this podcast after the fact.
So what would you say, what would you say the biggest issue organizations have virtualizing Microsoft SQL is? What's the biggest thing you run into in general?
It will surprise you.
Or if there's more than one thing. You're laughing there, so I'm guessing there's a whole slew of things.
You asked that question, and I was thinking, okay, which one do I pick? There's literally of them, but
what are they? Yeah, go through all of them. Like
let's focus on the simplest one. The simplest one, the most prevalent one, goes back to when VI admins were trying to sell virtualization to application owners. It was a struggle. Nobody wanted to put their SQL Server, their Exchange Server, their SAP, their Oracle on what they considered a hobby platform, right? Virtualization then was just getting started. And one of the things that VI admins had to compromise on is they go to the DBA and say, this virtualization thing is going to work. And the DBA goes like, I don't trust it. But if you're going to do it, please give me exactly what I have in physical. So a SQL Server in an enterprise is sitting on a 62 CPU server hardware. There is no resource governor penalizing that SQL Server if it's using only one of those CPUs, right?
Yeah, there's no right sizing a physical box like
that.
Yeah.
There's no right sizing. The SQL doesn't use it doesn't use it, nobody cares. But in the virtual environment where we're pulling resources and it's carving it up to different entities in that pool, we want everybody to be judicious in their use of resources. Usually when you over allocate memory, you have the idle memory tax. Looking at that memory and say, you are not using this, it becomes more expensive for the application to use. So right sizing was a concept that was foreign to application owners back then. What do you mean right sizing? Just add more resources. The more resources, unfortunately, the more resources you add to that workload, the more it becomes less performant because those resources are not being effectively used. So I am going to keep punching on this. The greatest harm you can do to yourself as an application owner is when you're virtualizing, you oversize the VM. What we want to do is know exactly what your application is using. And SQL, being the most virtualization-friendly application out there, has this tool where it can, if you ask it nicely, it will confess to you. Yeah, there is a 1 petabyte of memory here, but I'm only using 20 gig of it. If you go into SQL and you run DMV queries and you say, okay, show me exactly what you're using over the past whatever, SQL will tell you. Use that as the basis for your for sizing the VM that you're going to put that SQL Server on. Don't just put a hand in the air and wing it, because the result will be unsatisfactory. Your virtualization journey will suffer. So that's I think that should be the takeaway from what common mistakes do admins make when they virtualize their applications.
Yeah, that's good advice. If you don't mind me interrupting you for a second, does SQL Server also do what a lot of other applications and databases do, which is any extra memory it'll use as cache, and so that'll look to the operating system like it's being used, but it's not really being used, that sort of thing?
For SQL, this is what happens when you start Windows and SQL starts. SQL goes to Windows. Mr. Windows, how much memory do you have? And Windows says, oh, I have 1 petabyte. SQL goes, give me everything right now.
Exactly.
And if anybody needs some of these resources, have their people call my people, and I'll give some back. That's why the Windows admin is looking at that Windows box and looking at Task Manager and seeing 99% memory utilization, and it's thinking, oh, I need to add more memory. No, you don't. Go and ask SQL. Mr. SQL, I see you lock in 99% of this memory. How much of it are you actually using? And that actual usage is what creates penalty for that VM. If it's wasting resources, that access becomes very restricted and expensive for your transactions. This is why it's not uncommon to see an 8 CPU VM with, say, 128 gig of RAM outperforming a 64 CPU VM with 1 terabyte of memory. It's because those resources have been wasted. SQL is not really using it. It's just hoarding it. And the hypervisor is looking at that and say, bad VM, step on you.
Well, and overuse of resources too. Not only are you wasting resources other things can use, and you're talking about last week or the week before, we were talking a lot about CPU ready time and big VMs not being able to execute. So that plays right in here as well. But that also plays into DR sites and things. A lot of organizations try to have a smaller DR site, and really rely on the correct sizing of things. And so, that's being cost effective there too.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because again, one of the root causes of badly designed DR plans is the cost of protecting this huge, humongous VM. If you oversize the VM, you over allocate resources, and you need to protect it on the other side, you have to account for that large footprint. If you right size, you discover that your SQL Server is most likely using 40% of the resources you've allocated. If you cut that down, the expenses associated with your DR plan becomes very, very minimal. If you do the right thing from the beginning, you get not just good performance, but you are able to create optimal disaster recovery plan at less cost and with more reliability.
Yeah, the second and third order effects of decisions like this are really interesting. Organizations often don't think about second and third order effects, just the initial cost and the maintenance and that. But, having a smaller environment, or being able to have a smaller DR environment means less servers, means less network gear to hook it up to, all of that stuff. And the cost isn't just that one thing. It's less cost to maintain it, all of that stuff. And so I think you're onto something here.
I remember a year or two ago when they're talking performance as well, that ESXi and its memory management does a better job than the OS does, right? And so to some degree, you have to work that into the equation, where letting ESXi manage memory management across your workloads is better than trying to lock it down in an operating system, right?
Right, exactly. It's a virtualized environment. The hypervisor is what's sitting between the workload and the hardware. Let the hypervisor do what it's designed to do. Efficiently manage resources and surface it to your workload.
Now I struggled with believing that, Bob. I don't know how that's
we've got data to show it, man. In fact, we study. That's something out. Speaking of our blogs, it's something out on the Cloud Foundation blog that it got posted in the last couple of months or whatever. But we actually redid that study about memory management and performance and things like that. And ESXi is terrific in that regard. So I'll find the link for that. But it's really interesting, because that's another, second and third order savings sorts of thing when people start thinking about it. So. Yeah. So Deji, what do we do? So protecting workloads, while we're on the topic of disaster recovery, and the topic we were headed for anyhow here, so disaster recovery, I'm just thinking back to my previous life doing this stuff for real out as a customer and things like that. There are basically two ways we could do it. We could replicate the VM itself and do it that way, or the applications could handle the DR sorts of things themselves. And we just provisioned a a separate VM at the DR site that was always running, and it would do its log shipping and all that sort of stuff. Is there a preferred way for Microsoft SQL Server to do that sort of thing, or pros and cons?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Bob. You know what I want to do? I will actually like to rephrase this in a different way. Even though we are going to be talking about Microsoft SQL Server and DR for Microsoft SQL Server, let me just, for the benefit of everybody watching this now or watching this later, we're just using SQL as a reference point. Okay. Most of what I will talk about going forward applies to any workload or any application that you may consider business critical for your organization. Only you and your organizations can determine what that business critical application is. So even though I will be mentioning SQL and SQL and SQL, please know that this applies to the fax server. If the fax server is what makes money,
God help us all.
Organization. So. Yeah. So every sysadmin, in my experience, every sysadmin takes pride in their workloads uptime, the reliability, and the availability. They go to great lengths to protect their infrastructure. I don't think admins typically overlook or neglect disaster preparedness or disaster avoidance or disaster recovery for their business. The major problem is that because of various constraints, admins tend to make wrong or inadequate choices in the matter of disaster recovery. And this is what I want to clarify today. Take Microsoft SQL, for example. Microsoft has, they've done a great job over the years providing tools and configuration options for protecting SQL Server. Every SQL admin knows about Windows Server failover clustering. They know about availability group. They know about failover clustering instance, log shipping, as you mentioned, Bob. Most of them know all of this. The problem is that a lot of admins don't understand or appreciate the fact that these options are primarily high availability option. So this is what I call the first elephant in the room issue. A lot of admins make the mistake of confusing HA with disaster recovery. Mm-hmm. And they can be more different. The various HA option I mentioned, they do a decent job of recovering or ensuring that if a single SQL Server node fails, mm-hmm. There will be continuity by filling the resources over to the next node, and everything is good, right? Or maybe
one failure mode,
just one single component failure. WSFC, AG, FCI will protect that SQL Server. Okay, but that's high availability. A disaster event is where more than one component or the entire infrastructure in a given site or data center becomes unavailable. Mm-hmm. That is a DR event. HA is different. WSFC does not provide the utility for you to seamlessly or easily recover from a DR event. It does a good job of helping you recover a single SQL Server or a database. You could do log shipping, you could do a restore, backup, and all of that. Then server in the enterprise usually don't exist in a vacuum. They have upstream and downstream resources that they depend on. Domain controllers, for example, the web server that interfaces with the SQL server, the reporting server, and some other things in the enterprise. Mm-hmm. Where you use WSFC or AG or FCI to protect your SQL server and say, oh, I'm done with a DR. When you have a catastrophic failure, it doesn't just impact that SQL server. It impacts the other components, the other dependencies, right? You can't use AG to recover a domain controller. Log shipping doesn't work with your domain controllers. So it is imperative for an admin to be successful in designing a good disaster recovery plan for their organizations, they need to be able to easily distinguish between HA and DR. That's where we need to start from.
Yeah, no, and that's a great distinction. Just like RAID 1 is not a backup strategy, it protects against, I just hear you describing RAID 1 for database servers is what it amounts to. But, it protects against certain things. But yeah, you're right. You have to think about it more holistically. What does this thing depend on? What depends on it? Are we protecting those two? Are those going to go with? What are our failure modes? Just getting people, there's some, how there's laws out on the internet, Murphy's Law and things like that. There's one, it's like Gilbert's Law or something. If you write down the problem accurately, you're halfway there. Defining what a disaster looks like. If you can write it down and what your failure modes are, you're halfway there to
Yes. Let's talk about what VMware Broadcom has for making sure that SQL or any admin who is responsible for a business critical application can design and protect and recover those workloads efficiently. We have the VMware Live Recovery. The VMware Live Recovery is an umbrella name for VMware's suite of disaster recovery solutions. It's included as part of the VCF platform. VLR includes two distinct features or components, for lack of a better word. You have the VMware Live Cyber Recovery, which is for protection against malware and ransomware and other things like that. And then you have the VMware Live Server Recovery, which we used to call Site Recovery Manager. About
SRM, yeah. SRM's been around for a long time, yeah. Live Site Recovery, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and then that's the solution that gives you comprehensive, easily repeatable solution for protecting workloads, regardless of what applications they run. Okay, so when you're using AG for your HA, we can layer Live Recovery on top of that to give you a comprehensive disaster recovery solution. And we can recover the clustered workload as is without any manual administrative intervention in the event of a disaster.
And it takes care of the replication and all that stuff too?
Yes. So SRM, Live Server Recovery, has ability to work with any external storage or the visual application that you get with vSAN, right? So any storage that you use can be used in conjunction with SRM and VLR for your replication. Now, one of the things about VLSR is that it's application agnostic. It protects the workload as a unit, regardless of what OS or application it runs. All you need to tell it is, oh, I want to protect this VM and that one over there. If a disaster happens, I want to be able to push one button and I want you to bring the protected workload up in this fashion. Bring up this VM first. Logically, we want to bring up the domain controllers first to be recovered. Then this group of SQL Server VMs, then wait for maybe X number of minutes or until the button, and then do this, bring up the web server. By the way, I also want you to change the IP addresses of the VMs because I don't have a stretched VLANs across my DR site. When you're recovering them, I want you to automatically change the IP addresses to this, and this. Okay. What else can VLR do? VLR can then say, oh yeah, while you're doing that, also please run this script inside the VM. I can explain why being able to run scripts inside the VM is critical and important for any disaster recovery solution. And then you can tell VLR, okay, when you're done, I would like you to brew me a mocha latte after the successful. But okay,
if only. We actually are probably to that point too. But you described it initially as repeatability, and that's super important. These run books, the ability, and I always think back. I saw very many years ago now, and there was a VMUG presentation. I don't know if it was in Wisconsin or where it was, but a presentation by some IT guys at a chemical company, and their disaster scenario. They had giant chemical tanks out behind the building that they had their data center in, and they knew exactly what would happen, what their disaster looked like. One of those things ruptures, and they were all gone. The whole thing is gone, and I always think about them because they had something. They mentioned something, and like I said, it stuck with me. That they really don't assume that they're even going to be alive. And this is morbid, sure, but they don't even assume that they're going to be the ones to trigger the disaster recovery failover and all that stuff too. And so having a repeatable, testable, scriptable, to your point, and I'd like to get back to that too, is super important. Be able to automate this thing so that anybody walking in, their junior admin who took the day off and didn't blow up, can trigger the failover, So, and I know that's morbid, but if you're going to design this stuff, you might as well think about that, So tell us more. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you really have no option if you really want to design a functional and effective DR plan. You have to have something that's repeatable, something that can survive the catastrophe. So, for example, some organizations also have legal requirements to demonstrate their ability to survive a disaster. You have internal, external auditors who can come to you and say, show me your DR plan. One of the major pain points of doing disaster recovery with HA tools or options is that in order for you to test that, you actually have to declare an emergency. You have to have maintenance window. Things, your production has to come down while you show your auditors that, yes, you can bring things back. VLSR gives you the ability to configure all these recovery steps, the workbook, the workflow, how you want things recovered in what order, and for you to be able to test it on demand without impacting production. It's one of the greatest things about VLSR. You can all day, every day, 24/7, just go to your screen and say, okay, I want to test my recovery. And your recovery, the whole workload that you've protected will be brought up in an isolated environment. You can access it, you can test it, and your production environment is still going on without interruption.
That's one of the perils is in testing is having an environment come up that's identical to the other one,
There's certainly always a gap in that. You have it over here in a domain, but there's still a connection that you do have to do DNS changes at some point that you can't test when you're testing, but you get pretty close, I would assume. One question for you.
Actually, Eric, with VLSR, remember, you are not protecting just the SQL Server. You're protecting the SQL Server and all the dependencies. The domain controller and the DNS servers and your IPAM or whatever is part of that recovery plan. When you go and do the test, you recover the whole thing in ways you've configured, and you have a well-configured instance of what you have in production in your test environment.
I understand. It is a test environment that is not in your production. And until you actually do a production switchover, there's a piece of that you don't know if it's going to actually switch, right? Yeah, you can say go set that up, but how do you actually get to the last two steps when you say, okay, will it actually switch?
Well, so you're thinking about network stuff too, and keep in mind that what Deji is describing here will also, using NSX, will recreate the network segments, recreate all those relationships as well, and it replicates that stuff. So, the ability to test this stuff, you really want to be confident that what you're describing, Eric, actually doesn't happen. That and you're right. There's always risk. Something changed, something's not quite right. But the more you test,
okay, Bob,
you drive that to zero.
Bob, so that the repeatability option or the benefit is that you can actually every day keep refining your workbook. If things change in your production environment, you just go to your runbook, make modification without impacting your production. So whatever has changed on the underlying infrastructure, you make the change in your workbook, in your runbook that you've configured, and you're done. And you can, again, test it. So to Eric's point, please let's clarify. When VLSR brings up those workloads, they're bringing up the workloads that you've configured, the way you've configured them. When you do the runbook, you actually have to specify the network pairs. Okay, this network on the primary side that I'm protecting, this is what it translates to on this DR side. When you bring this VM, join it to this network. So you, in the test environment, we fill it into a bubble. That's what we call the network.
Right.
The bubble could be the default network that we create in VLSR, or it could be one that the customer has actually physically provisioned, either in NSX or in the physical network, and said, this is fenced off from my production. Fill it into this environment.
Right.
It is isolated from production, but it is exactly as what you have in production.
Hi, I'm just tainted because last night at midnight we were still doing a deploy for the blog servers, and we discovered that the internal DNS for anybody that's on VPN inside of an employee base couldn't get access. And you're like, oh,
that is one of the things that customers miss. The machine that you are going to use for testing your recovered workload in the test environment also needs access to that network.
Yeah.
So usually when you do your SRM VLSR configuration, you put some jump boxes in there that you can then use to access and test and show your auditors that, okay, things are working.
That's a really important safety tip there. Yeah, that's a good right there. That's worth the price of admission listening to this podcast here. Remember your jump boxes. Somebody's going to need. Yeah.
I have one other question. That was one of my questions. My next question would be, because you don't want to be keeping this up in real time 24/7. Like, can you set like how often you want this to keep itself updated, like once an hour? Like, do we shadow every disk write off to the high availability set, right? Or does that not high availability disaster
synchronous mirroring sort of thing? Yeah.
Okay. So
CLR have that setting where I could say, what's my threshold for syncing?
Well, you're talking about RTO and RPO here, yeah.
So that's a very good question. And RPO, RTO, MTB, whatever MTB, all of these things are nomenclatures that every admin trying to design a disaster recovery plan has to be aware of. This is a conversation that they will have to sit down with the business owner, their applications owner, their stakeholders, and say, okay, how much data can we afford to lose in a disaster? That defines your recovery point objective.
Yeah.
If the CEO comes back and say, we can't afford to lose any data, he's asking you for an RP of 0.
Yeah.
Which means that you need
yes.
You need, thank you. You need a solution that can get the data, the changed data from production to your DR site in less than a minute, or actually commit it to the DR site before they write it to the protected site.
Yes,
so
right.
And that is, my friend, very expensive. Now,
and I took my VCP-VCF certification class, and I learned that. So I could ask that question.
Yeah. So you have to define. You have to have an agreement on the RTO. You have to have an agreement on the RPO, and whatever decision is handed down to you has to be supported with the equivalent funding to achieve that objective. There is no magic in technology.
Yeah,
it's magical. But
what I love to your point, you can set it to do Bob, I think you said you can set it to the right before you do it to the primary. You go do it to the HA environment or the.
Deji was mentioning that, yeah.
Right.
And that's the right way to do it if you're going to do that. That's
you need that zero down. Yeah. Everything is written there first. So everything is going to be there. You switch over. Don't lose anything. Yeah. But it's expensive.
Now, one of the things with SQL, by the way, SRM and VLSR does their recovery with a crash consistent policy. It's not application consistent. It's just like you walk to the data center, you shut down the VR, you pull the plug on your server. When SQL comes back up, it has the ability, the resilience to actually heal itself, replay the logs for up to that point, and continue to carry on from there. So one of the things we have with Microsoft SQL is that feature, that confidence that, if we crash consistent recover a VM, we will get all the way up to the point of that failure. And whatever is coming after that disaster, we are not responsible for because it never made it to that VM. You could do 1 minute replication, you could do 0 minutes replication, you could do 15 or 1 hour, depending on what your management mandates and how much money they've given you for that solution.
And bandwidth and all that stuff, like this, there's again second and third order thoughts to this, no, I often joke about RPO and RTO because they answer how much time can we be down? Well, 0, of course. And how much time can we be down? How much data can we lose? 0, of course. Okay, I will need $10 trillion. Well, now we can talk.
I mean, if they say you can't be down for any number of minutes, then you're looking at, okay, we put multiple instances of those servers in multiple data centers across multiple geographic region, and we'll let.
Then you need some application design in there too. There's all sorts of other stuff. It's not as easy. The crash consistency that you're talking about, I'm really glad you mentioned that. The idea, everything really knows how to deal with a power outage. The power just stopped. It knows how to recover. File systems know how to fix themselves, all that stuff. And so, and that if you can get away with, a lot of workloads can get away with that level of reliability, and if you can get away with it, it's cheap, that's awesome, we enable a lot of that stuff too. So, cool. Very cool.
So again, for those listening, the minimum requirement for you to design a functional, optimal, repeatable DR plan is first sit down with your business owners, get clarification on what the expectations are. Do you have any legal requirements? Do you have any compliance requirement? How much are they willing to fund? How many data centers do they want to spread things over? If budget is a constraint, a single data center with all your workload, eggs in one basket, layer VLSR on top of it, do the replication 15 minutes interval or 30 minutes interval depending on your bandwidth, and get the confidence that if whatever hits the fan, when you go to VLSR, SRM, and click that recover button, it will automatically go and do.
I have another. I'm going to switch gears because we're a community podcast, and so as much as I want this to be an advertisement for VMware Live Recovery, I got to ask you, have you ever seen instances where it's worked really well, and have you seen instances where people didn't have it and it ended up very bad in your career, spending time with SQL workloads? places where somebody did it right, and you don't have to mention who or maybe, but do people actually have disasters? Like,
Yes, they do.
Do you experience it?
Yes, and unfortunately, during I think the first 6 months of my being a VMware employee, I happened to be dumped into that fire. There was flooding in some parts of the country, and obviously data centers flooded. People who had disaster recovery plan in place at that time didn't have to sweat much, again, because this is how SRM VLR works. We tell the replication engine, either vSphere replication or the array replication engine, please ship copies of this VM over to that site. Those VMs are not usable. They're just placeholder. They're just files in a data store or multiple data stores in an array. When the disaster happens, you just go and you say, Mr. SRM, Mr. VLSR, I want to declare disaster. SRM will ask you, are you sure? Yes. SRM goes and brings up all those files, attach them to what you've configured, power them on, and you have exactly the same copies of that VM that you protected up to the point where that disaster happened. So now, you've cut out a lot of manual.
When that happened, did they take you to dinner and give you like a award trophy or something to say thank you very much? It worked.
No, the reward is usually sleeping, Eric. You get to sleep finally.
No, I don't think that's allowed.
You never get thanked for that, right? It just works, and everybody's happy, right?
No, I get punch, I get kudos. Actually being able to help customers resuscitate continuity, restore continuity into their operation, their production environment, things that make money for them is very gratifying and satisfying.
Other question: do you get called in the middle of the night and do you have to drive in to the flood? And do they actually look for you sometimes?
Come on, please come. How would it be fun if you don't get sleep deprivations from it?
Right.
Yes.
I know that SAP, I used to hear a story. SAP had a Tiger team because they're across the street from VMware up in Palo Alto. And I knew some guys from them. They actually had a Tiger team that would get on flights and they would guarantee that they could be at a customer site anywhere globally within 8 hours, right? 6 hours. And then, because some of these downtimes, these disasters were, millions of dollars an hour, right? And so they were like, they kept leased jets ready. They had a Tiger team to go do that, and then they were going to go there and make sure that whatever was there was going to be recovered. So yeah. Any failures that stick in your mind?
Failure to plan leads to failure. But those who actually planned and configured their protection and disaster recovery plan don't fail, because it's binary. You either configure it well or you didn't. If you did it well, you are guaranteed success. Again, we are bringing exact copies of your protected workloads the way they were up to the point of that failure. We're just reconnecting and bringing them. We're just removing the manual intervention without us knowing what's actually running inside. And I mentioned scripts. I think Bob, you said you were going to come.
Yeah, let's get back to that.
So one of the challenges with recovering a SQL Server infrastructure is, especially when they're clustered, the VMs, the servers in themselves have IP addresses. The cluster has an IP address. There's a virtual IP that's layered across all the nodes. That's how the application and the end user interface with that cluster, right? That cluster is not bound to any physical network card. When that changes, when you do a disaster recovery, you need to find a way to change those configurations. the IP addresses and the subnet and everything for those virtual IP. SRM has the ability to let you insert PowerShell scripts, whatever scripts, into the process where it brings up the first node of the VM of the cluster. You tell it go and run PowerShell to bring up this, force the cluster to start. Things like that. There is no manual intervention required. It will go and do that. Change the IP for the VMs. Change the IP for the VIPs. Start the cluster and make sure that everything runs and works well.
Nice.
And it's just click of the button at that point. You don't need to manually do anything. Also, it keeps records, logs of all the steps, all the runs. So your auditors or your security people can come back and review, okay, what actually happened, what did we bring up, and all that.
Yeah. Or if it goes wrong, you can troubleshoot it pretty quickly there too,
You can,
because at the very least, if it's planned well, there might be a little thing, but you've minimized the amount of work you need to do to something, to one thing, to two things maybe, and not rebuild the whole environment from scratch in the next 24 hours. Sort of deal.
And then talking about what could go wrong, you could have a call out for your IPAM, for example, and say, okay, somebody somewhere needs to do something. Now, if that person is at lunch or just unavailable, well, we can help you with that, right? So, some things could fail. Human errors could come in, but we do our best to do the recovery, follow the steps as you've defined it, and you can always change it based on changing realities.
This just reminds me of painting a car with a spray gun. If you've ever had fun of getting to paint a car or paint a living room or whatever, the work is in the masking and the taping and the sanding and the prepping. By the time you're ready to paint takes 7 minutes and you're done, right? It's like it's 3 days to get everything ready to paint. But then when you've got, that's all the work. The painting itself is nothing. It's kind of right. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. The configuration, the setting up the run book, setting up the flow, knowing what comes first, what comes next, what comes last, which order you're going to recover the VMs or the workloads. Those are the things that go into the planning, and then in steady state, you're good. Once if something happens and you call on SRM or VLSR to do, it's just going to go do what you've pre-programmed.
But that's perilous too, because people forget how much planning went into it. One of the worst things I've ever been told after an outage was, "Oh, that wasn't so bad," and okay, but we put hundreds of hours into planning it so that you're right, it wasn't so bad. We need to keep doing that. And so
again, that's what repeatability means. So you go back. Usually, you don't set and forget, because we know the underlying infrastructure changes over time, right? Routers may get changed to maybe storage or whatever. You don't just set it last year and say, okay, I expect it to work in 2 years. You keep modifying it, non-destructively.
I look at that and I realize that long-term viability of companies are they develop these processes and they do them generation when some workers leave, the next workers come, it comes on. And I look at Broadcom and the way they are organized that way. They've acquired companies. They have a process, and the process, people resign at Broadcom and the process keeps going, right? So that's
really cool. And it's mandated in the EU now. There's the DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, that makes it law now to practice this stuff and to actually set this stuff up and think about it. And that for financial firms and people that look like financial firms, there's a lot of folks that are covered by that. Been a lot of that took effect in January, mid to late January here. So a lot of interest in what Deji's talking about here, a lot of interest in just, how does, resilience is something that we've actually stopped talking about it a bit at VMware.
Because it's, like most things, we
woven in.
We now assume that everybody knows it. And,
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've been going for nearly an hour, so I kind of have to wrap it up here, guys. So first off, thank you for coming. You're an application engineer from Broadcom, the VCF division. Deji, thanks for taking lunchtime and coming and being on the show. We always do at the end of the show, we stream at V Barbecue on YouTube. So we always do a little bit of barbecue question and answer here. And so, Deji, I don't know where you reside. We never got to that, but I assume it's globally somewhere. But why don't you tell us a little bit about where you reside, and do you guys eat any barbecue when you're
Eric, I wish you hadn't brought that. Anyway, to answer the first question, which is easy for me, I live in sunny San Diego. Yeah.
All right. There you go.
Barbecue. And you cannot tell that I'm not originally from the US, then I don't know what to tell you. But where I come from, this is how we eat our meat. You cook it first, then you cook it again, and then after that, you cook it.
You cook it one more time.
Done.
Well, just make sure
When
it's
you're
dead.
done, then you finally cook it. My first cultural shock in America was going and ordering ribs, barbecue. How do you want it? I'm like, okay, this looks like it says medium well. Okay, give me medium well. And I came and there was blood on it. I'm like, okay, I don't like when, so yeah, I don't.
You're gonna like a super dry rubbed,
Dry brine,
smoker. So it's more like jerky than it is kind of meat. Right?
My barbecue has to look like me when it's done.
Right. Okay. Very, very, very crispy. Very, very crispy and bald. And yeah, that's what we'll say. It's older than when you started there at VMware.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for being here. Tony Foster, I know you've been waiting on the call, listening to the podcast as always. You got any barbecue report for us? Oh, no, he checked out. I saw he left. He had something else to go to. So we don't have him.
Yeah, I've got a pork butt on the smoker right now, if that counts.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, come on over.
Yeah, I'm hungry. Yeah.
I started the carnivore diet. I'm enjoying it. As long as it's meat, I can eat it.
I'm right now on a 3-day fast. I'm 2 days in, so I'm now entering my third day. And all I do is think about food. I dream about food. I talk about food.
The third day is the hardest.
It's like, oh my gosh, like it's good. I do it. I try to do it every other month or maybe once a quarter. Go on a kind of 3-day fast. It does stem cell release on the third day, so it helps your joints, inflammation, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so
I've heard good things. As
I get older, I realize that the reason I don't look 90 is because of these 3-day fasts I do, right? Like, and that's, but I mean, I could use some pork butt. I could use anything right now, but that sounds delicious.
Sorry to tempt you, man. I wouldn't have brought it up if I had known.
No, it's I thought I'm going to have to make it through the V Barbecue report at the end here. It's going to be like, do I even say anything? Deji, Corey, Bob, thanks for being here. We'll be back again next week, as always, Wednesday, 12 to 1. If you want to join and you made it this far, you can join us on TalkShoe. You go to TalkShoe.com and search for the VMware Community Roundtable Podcast, and you can join chat with Tony and myself and ask us questions in real time. And we got an audio feed as well. So feel free to join us until next week. Everybody go get some barbecue and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Bob. Corey. Thanks, Eric.